So part of my audience, damn, that sounds prestigious to say. My audience, part of you will agree with this and already know all the arguments I'm about to make. Part of you will think that I'm a nutter. This is not a new take, but it is not as well known as I think it should be. The 5th edition Barbarian is not durable. It's not durable. It has fewer effective hit points while raging than most other classes in the game. Primarily because in order to really do its thing, the Barbarian wants to be in melee. So here's the problem. You have D12 hit dice, which means 7 plus con mod per level. Sounds like a lot, but it's only 1 hit point per level more than a fighter or a paladin or a ranger. Only 2 more than a monk, or I think the sorcerer gets D8s, the rogue gets D8s. It's not actually that much more hit points than other classes. It is more, but usually it's like 1 or 2 points per level. It's not a lot. Constitution modifier is actually the far bigger issue, or not issue, but the far bigger deciding factor in your health rather than your actual hit dice. The difference between the highest and lowest just isn't that big. So you have a few more hit points than other classes. This hardly makes up for anything. Your primary source of durability is when you are raging. You have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, which, granted, is most of the damage that monsters are going to be dealing. Nearly all monsters default to some sort of basic melee attack that does bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. Sure, there are spellcasting enemies out there, and they will have cantrips that deal other damage types. Relatively rare. I'd say, I think it's fair to say that 90% of monsters do bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage as their at-will option. So you have that going for you, and that is about it. Your AC is not great. You are more or less restricted to medium armor, because I think it's because your rage doesn't work if you're wearing heavier than medium armor. I can't remember what the actual restriction is. But you don't want to wear heavier than medium armor. So you're looking at about a 17-ish, maybe 19 AC, maybe up to 20 if you have a magic shield, if you're using one-handed weapon and shield and really tanking your damage. Tanking? Yeah, that's how the Barbarian tanks. They tank their damage in order to get a few extra points of AC. Like 17 to 20 range, including magic items. So your AC is okay at the best of times. Usually it's going to be kind of on the lower end, like 17-ish if you're wielding a two-handed weapon. Which is not great for a frontliner already. But then you also get reckless attack, which means that you are granting advantage to everyone who wants to attack you for an entire round at a time, in order to get advantage on your attack. Now, if you get advantage on your one attack, and then you take 4 or 5 more attacks, you are actually losing out on the extra damage. Like your damage boost is not as great as the amount of extra damage that you are taking, even factoring in your resistance. So you've got that, and then also you are more or less forced into melee if you want to really make use of your class features. Your class features really push you into melee. You want to be strength focused. You want to do melee attacks because that's where you get your rage damage bonus. And if otherwise, why are you even being a barbarian, right? Right? I think we can all agree. I think it's not a controversial take that the barbarian should be a melee class. It really pushes you towards being melee. And that the fantasy of the barbarian is definitely the melee combatant. So if you're playing a barbarian, you're probably playing melee. You can do range stuff. Yes, I'm not saying you can't do range stuff. But you're playing the barbarian to be a melee fighter. So you've got 50% more, roughly, like averaging things out. You got about 50% more attacks against you will hit. You're taking way more attacks than if you were to stay at range. And you are also, and you don't have that many more hit points than a normal person. Your AC is not great to begin with. So all of these things together mean that the Barbarian actually ends up taking more damage over the course of an average fight than other characters. And that's a problem. Because that means that the Barbarian actually is, in aggregate, more fragile than other characters. You are taking more damage than you would if you were playing, like, say, a fighter at range in heavy armor using a bow. That fighter is going to last longer than the Barbarian. The Barbarian is going to run out of hit points and go down or die faster than the fighter does. So I have two thoughts on this. What can be done and why this is a problem, really. And I want to address that second part first, actually. It is a problem because the fantasy of the Barbarian is that you are indomitable. You go into melee knowing that it's dangerous, but you can take it. But 5e doesn't actually let you take it. The 5e Barbarian is actually more fragile because you have so many penalties going on you. You don't get a good AC, and you're giving people bonuses to hit you, and you don't have enough health or self-sustainability to really soak all that up. And it is a problem because people see this as the Barbarian going forward, taking the hits so that their party doesn't, the party behind them. They're the frontliner. They're the tank. That's what their job is. They go take the hits that their allies don't have to. But if the whole party stayed at range instead of giving melee enemies free attacks that they don't have to give them, that's damage the party didn't have to take in the first place. You are volunteering to take damage that you don't have to take. And what I discovered when I was playing a Barbarian is that a lot of the time, the most efficient way for me to play the Barbarian was not to rage and to dodge. If we had any kind of choke point, get in that choke point and dodge in the doorway. It's called doorway dodging. It's a basic D&D tactic. Because I had a good AC. I got myself a magic shield. I had a 20 AC most of the time. I had a two-handed weapon, but I usually stuck with one-handed weapon and shield because my damage was never going to compete with everyone else's damage anyways. Even with a two-handed weapon, it wasn't going to compete with, the ranger and the cleric and everyone else, the druid. These guys are all doing way more damage than me regardless. So I might as well get tanky and try to find situations where I can control the enemy movement a little bit. And I found that by dodging was a much better way to ensure my survivability. Now, I was doing no damage, but that's fine. As long as our party doesn't take damage, we will eventually win, right? The ranged combatants behind me are going to be safe because I am blocking the enemy. They cannot physically move through me, and they cannot really hurt me effectively because I have a relatively high AC. Since I was using a shield. I had a +1 magic shield from the artificer. He gave me his one of his infusions, magic shield. Real nice. And then I think I found a magic shield later. Yeah, I think I actually got a real magic shield for that character. And that's basically the only way to tank in 5th edition is find a doorway. So it's very battlefield specific because not every battlefield's going to have a choke point like that. And then I dodge. Which is not that exciting, really. It doesn't fulfill the fantasy of the Barbarian, where I foam at the mouth and I rush forward and I start chopping down enemies. And, their blows just glance off of me because I've got too many hit points. I don't even have to worry about it. It's not like at any time I tried to do that, I went down. I went down fast. I went unconscious a lot in that game. And as soon as you go unconscious, you lose your rage. Which is a daily resource more precious than spell slots. You have very few rages relative to the number that you actually need over the course of an adventuring day. Which I don't know if I've talked about that on this channel before, but barbarians don't have enough rage. And the whole rage mechanic, maybe I'll talk about it at some point. The whole rage mechanic is just kind of flawed from the get-go. There's a lot of problems with the way that they try to implement rage in both 3rd edition and 5th edition, because it's a very similar kind of mechanic. The idea, I could do this quickly. So the idea that there is a state that you enter that has all of these buffs for being in rage is problematic from the get-go, because either you are in rage or you are not in rage. If you're in rage, you have all your class features, but if it happens too often, you need to design the class to account for that. And so that becomes your baseline, which means it's not special. You are achieving baseline by using up one of your rages. If you are not in rage, you have no class features, which is kind of the way that 5th edition does it. And I think 3rd did it as well. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think they got almost no class features if they were not in rage. Same as with 5th edition. But anyways, there's much better ways to build a barbarian and to design the rage mechanic, because it is iconic to the class archetype. But that's not what I'm talking about today. Today I'm talking about how specifically about durability. The barbarian is not durable because despite their resistance and despite their 1 or 2 extra hit points per level compared to other martial classes, they don't, like, they have to volunteer to take damage that they wouldn't normally have to take, or they have to do things that their class isn't really, like, they have to waste half their class to be an actual tank, to find a choke point and dodge in it. Meanwhile, a cleric can dodge every round while maintaining spirit guardians and control a huge swath of the battlefield. They are more tanky because they have access to better armor. Well, same or better, actually. They get medium by default, but they can go to heavy pretty easily. And they are not penalized for using a shield at all. And they can dodge every round while maintaining concentration on a spell that completely controls the battlefield and does damage to a huge area. It's actually it's big. It's a big area. Spirit Guardians is a excellent spell. So compare those two, and you might think, oh, but Spirit Guardians is a spell. It uses up a spell slot. That's a daily resource. Rage is a daily resource. Rage is a more precious daily resource than Spirit Guardians, than the 3rd level spell slot. You get fewer of them over the course of an adventuring day. At basically every level, I think. I think at every level, well, maybe not at 5th level, like when they first get it. They only get 2 spell slots, and I think you've gone up to 3 rages by then. I could be misremembering. I don't remember exactly how fast rage advances. But anyways, what I'm getting at is that the Barbarian is not as durable as you might think. What can be done to fix this? I'm going to go back to that point. What can be done to fix this? Well, I rewrote the Barbarian. I did a Barbarian full rewrite. It's a custom class. I call it the Sabrock Barbarian. I'll put a link in the description because I'm pretty proud of it. And what I did there was I straight doubled Barbarian hit points. We're not going to interact with resistance at this point. You can get resistance from other sources. Let's double the Barbarian hit points, starting from level 2. So 1st level hit points are not doubled. 2nd level and on is doubled. All the hit points you get from being a Barbarian. So you're actually getting 14 plus double con at every level starting from 2nd onward. Which I could have just written as part of their class progression instead of making it a feature, but I decided to make it a feature. What the fuck ever. But Barbarians, these Barbarians, they have damage reduction as a built-in maneuver. Instead of entering a rage state, rage is a resource that you generate over the course of the fight, and then you expend to use rage powers. These powers can let you do extra damage. They can give you control effects. They can reduce incoming damage. Some of the higher level ones can actually heal you. So you can sustain yourself and punish enemies for damaging you, because taking damage is one of the things that generates rage. So what you need, really, because I don't want to say, oh, the fix to Barbarian is to play my Barbarian. Because that's kind of a cop-out. I don't really like that as an answer. I want to give a general answer. The fix to Barbarian is to give them self-sustain, to give them actual durability, in that they are not punishing themselves in order to use their features. Because right now the Barbarian has to punish itself to use a feature. Moving into melee is a punishment. Giving combat advantage, or giving advantage to all enemies for an entire round is a punishment. And you don't need to do these things. things. Does the Barbarian need to have advantage on every attack? That's not really iconic to the Barbarian. High accuracy? No. High damage is the fantasy. So give the Barbarian more damage and or give them more durability. Don't be granting advantage. Like because here's the thing. I put Reckless Attack basically unaltered, into my version of Barbarian because that Barbarian has bad AC. The idea is that you tank AC, but you have enough hit points, literally twice as many hit points as the PHB Barbarian, and you have the ability to reduce incoming damage as it's happening to you. And when you take damage, you generate a resource that allows you to hit back even harder or sustain yourself. So letting enemies hit you actually is a good thing in this case. The PHB Barbarian letting enemies hit you is not a good thing. There's no benefit to that. You kind of tend to do it because you want to make sure your attacks hit. But there's no benefit to being hit. It's still a purely bad thing, taking damage as that Barbarian. Unless you were unable to attack because you're in melee, you're melee spec only. So any enemies that are more than 40 feet away or in the sky are completely immune to your attacks. So you are doing 0 damage. And if you don't make an attack, you can't sustain your rage. So them attacking you can let you sustain your rage, which is kind of, that is sour fruit for sure. Is sour fruit a metaphor? Is that a saying? I don't know, but it is now. It's sour fruit. It is fruit, but it's sour. Yuck. So there's lots of different ways that you could fix the Barbarian. I think that a full from the ground rewrite is necessary. I kind of think this about all martial classes. There is no fix for martial classes that doesn't involve the addition of maneuvers of some sort of active list of abilities to choose from and build your character that way, similar to spells, but not actually a spell system. I think any other fix is going to be stopgap at best. It's not going to really address all the issues that martials have. And so when I rebuilt the Barbarian, I knew that I was going to do some sort of rage power. The rage mechanic is actually sort of the core mechanic that I knew that I wanted to do. But even without that, even without the whole like rage powers mechanic and maneuvers, like the Barbarian needs to have a way to sustain itself in ways that other classes cannot do. Because it has middling to poor AC and is giving advantage to all attackers, the additional hit dice are not enough to offset that, because you have to go into melee and you're pushing enemies towards a 100% hit chance. Almost 100% if you have, let's say you don't have as high as 17. Let's say you're using a two-handed weapon, you don't emphasize dex, you're at like a 14, 15 AC. It's pretty bad, even at first level. And it doesn't scale at all, because AC in this game does not scale. For some reason. Anyways, and then you're also granting advantage on all attacks. You're talking about like a 75, 80, 90% hit chance every time you take an attack. If there's a moderate number of enemies on the battlefield, you're going to be the closest. You're the easiest target. It doesn't take the DM much, like, cajoling to have those monsters focus you. You're the closest, easiest target. Unless they are intelligent, in which case you are not a threat. The wizard is. Go for the wizard. But like you're taking so much damage. Like the 1 or 2 extra hit points per level is not going to make a difference. You need other active abilities, and that's kind of the crux of good design. Good class design is active abilities. Passive abilities are cool because you don't really have to think about them that much, particularly if they are just modifying your core stats instead of altering an event because like there's a lot of passive abilities that sort of trigger when something happens. You don't have to spend anything on them, but they still happen at a certain time. But active abilities, a list of things that you choose to do, that is how you make an interesting and engaging class design. I'm coming up on 20 minutes here, and I'm not even sure that I've made my point. The Barbarian is a poorly written class. I think we all know this. It is bottom tier. It is the bottom of F tier. Some people say the monk is the worst class. Some people say the rogue is the worst class. I can see what they're saying. I think the barbarian is probably still the worst designed class, even if it might be technically better than the rogue. But specifically, like, I'm not talking about general class design. I'm talking about specifically the barbarian is not a durable class because you can't just look at hit points. Yes, the barbarian has the biggest hit die. It technically gets the most hit points out of any class in the game, but the difference is marginal, and it is way more than offset by the fact that it has to operate in melee. It is granting advantage on most, if not all, enemy attacks. And your resistance isn't enough to make up the difference. Because the resistance is just half damage from some sources. As a general thing, the bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage isn't even the highest source, or isn't even the highest amount of damage you're going to be taking. You're probably, if you're taking other damage types, you're taking more of it. Because that's going to be your spells, your dragon breath, things like that. Beholder eye rays and mind flare, mind blasts, and things like that. And you can say, oh, but the bear totem barbarian gets resistance to all but psychic. Okay, so that doesn't really address. First off, it's a boring subclass. It doesn't really address any of the barbarian's other problems. Also, not every barbarian is going to be a bear totem barbarian. You know, that is one subclass. You can't apply that to the entire class. And even in that case, it's still not enough. Like, it helps, sure, it offsets a bit. It does not offset enough. You're still going to be suffering from all of the barbarians' basic weaknesses. So anyways, that's my rant about barbarians today. It is more of a rant today than an actual, like, well thought out opinion. But dang, I played a barbarian for about a year. Y'all know this. I've told this story so many times. It's a bad time. The barbarian is such a badly written class. Oh my gosh.